In this video, I want to take just a moment to hopefully ease your mind about the reading load in this class. Because this is a history class, the reading load is a bit intense. History is a reading and writing intensive discipline. History, for the longest time, was focused on written records. What have people in the past left behind in terms of written documentation? Those are the primary sources, those written documents that come from the time frame in which, or I should say, the time frame that we're studying, as we talked about in Unit 1. For this class, we have 3 books that you need to have purchased. Hopefully you have them now. If you don't yet, please let me know so that we can work on that. The first one is, let me see if I can get this right, John Chastain's Born in Blood and Fire. This is our main textbook. It's in its 4th edition currently, the one I just held up. If you have an earlier edition of the book, though, it will work. I believe that editions 1 and 2 have essentially the same chapter themes as the 4th edition, or the current one. That means that you can just read the chapters that are assigned in the syllabus and in the reading schedule and the learning modules, and you'll be fine. If you have the 3rd edition, the chapter numbering is a little different. And I can't remember off the top of my head now because I don't have a 3rd edition anymore if you have to add 1 or subtract 1 for that. But anyone who's using the 3rd, please contact me, let me know, and I can ask you some questions. We can figure that out and make sure that you're on the right page for which chapters you need to be reading. So that's the first one. The second one is James Wood's Problems in Latin American History, Modern Latin American History. That one is a reader that, in terms of themes and topics, roughly corresponds to the themes and topics that we'll be reading about in Chastain. Wood, though, on the other hand, rather than providing us a secondary source textbook, provides us a bunch of different perspectives on certain themes in Latin American history by giving us different excerpts of both secondary and primary sources. So each chapter contains usually 5 or 6 different excerpts of different documents to help us get those different perspectives. And I just said different a whole lot in that sentence, but hopefully you get the idea. That's where that book is coming from. So it's a way of seeing new perspectives and that there are multiple ways of looking at the same topics that we learned about in Chastain. Also, some of those primary source excerpts in Wood will provide us a small glimpse into the types of sources that Chastain used to write his narrative in the textbook. Last but not least, we have I, Rigoberta Menchú, an Indian woman in Guatemala. This is, as you'll read about and we'll learn about more, what we'll be focusing on in Unit 7. You'll have an essay assignment to complete on Rigoberta Menchú, and so you will need to read the book in its entirety. It's a good idea to start earlier rather than later. We will focus on the book in Unit 7. So you'll have 2 whole weeks where we will be thinking just about that book in preparation for you to complete your essay. So those are the readings that we have. You'll notice that there are assignments from Chastain and Wood for each unit, along with, I should say, a journal article. So journal articles from history journals are secondary sources written by historians in which they focus on a specific kind of more close-grained theme than we will get from the textbook, and they write about it in a lot more detail. And so that's a way of seeing kind of a different approach that historians have to writing about the past. And putting all of these things together will provide us a multiplicity of perspectives on the past. So that's all to introduce what we're reading. You might be thinking, how can I possibly read all of that? The answer is you probably can't, at least not word for word. So don't approach this in terms of reading things word for word. Instead, use the resources that I've posted below. There are links to various websites to talk about how to skim for meaning, how to look at the author's main thesis, as well as the arguments and supporting evidence that he or she is making. Read in that way. So I often don't read a book from cover to cover. I read the introduction. I kind of skim through some of the main paragraphs and read more closely things that catch my interest or that I don't quite understand, you can do that from chapter to chapter as well. So in Chasteen, you'll notice that the first few paragraphs, paragraph to the chapter that explain what the main themes are, what the issues are that he will be discussing in that chapter. So you read those, you skim through the body of the chapter, read the conclusion, and you can have a sense of what's going on there. And that's just one kind of briefly described method of reading quickly for college courses. But again, don't worry if you don't read it all. You won't be able to read it all. Read what you need to read to understand the point of the themes that we're focusing on in each chapter. You'll also maybe do that with Wood. You might read the introduction paragraphs to each of the documents in the chapter, but you'll only read 2 of the documents in any detail. That's okay. That's one way of learning as much as you can in very broad terms about the past, and then focusing in on things that you find interesting and that you see as significant. And as we go along, something we'll be talking about is how do we define historical significance? What makes something significant? That's something to think about as you read. Hopefully this is helpful in some way. Hopefully that wasn't just a ramble, but take to heart this idea that you don't have to read everything word for word. There are strategies you can use, and you can use the resources I've given you here to get through all of the reading.